They didn't walk into the room expecting history. It was meant to be another routine congressional hearing, another scripted exchange behind microphones and nameplates. Cameras were positioned, staff members shuffled papers, and the room settled into the familiar boredom of government procedure. No one leaned forward. No one held their breath. Not yet. But something was already shifting beneath the polished wood tables and cold fluorescent lights, something no one had written into the agenda. And when the first words were spoken, the air changed in a way that couldn't be reversed. The hearing room had seen countless debates. Voices had risen and fallen here before. Promises had been made and forgotten in this very space. Power had always belonged to those who controlled the schedule, the rules, the time. But that morning, a different kind of power walked in. It wasn't loud. It wasn't announced. It didn't arrive with applause. It simply took its seat and waited. Across the room, eyes rested on Jasmine Crockett. Some saw just another congresswoman. Others saw trouble. A few sensed something different without knowing why. Beside the shifting atmosphere of the hearing, whispers traveled through rows of observers and aides. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat not as a spectacle, but as presence, a quiet confirmation that whatever was about to happen held more weight than most realized. There was tension beneath the surface politeness, like the moment before thunder breaks across the sky. No one openly acknowledged it, but the cameras picked up the subtle signs: the straightened posture, the tightened jawlines, the hands folded just a little too tightly against the table. The routine was about to be broken. And then it began. The first statements didn't feel explosive. In fact, they felt almost calm, but too calm, like the eye of a storm. The words were carefully placed, each sentence landing with intention. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She didn't perform for the cameras. She spoke as though the room wasn't filled with people, as though she was speaking to something bigger than politics, bigger than parties, bigger than the scripted divide. And slowly, a subtle change took place. People stopped moving. The soft shuffling of papers faded. Typing fingers froze mid-air. Eyes that had been drifting to phones and screens now locked onto the center of the room. Every word seemed to carry more than its sound. It carried pressure, memory, frustration, determination, truth, layered and unfiltered. The moment no one expected had started to grow. Minutes passed, and something unusual happened. No one interrupted. Those who normally raised their voices, who claimed their time aggressively, now allowed the space to stretch. It was as if the room instinctively knew that interrupting would only make the moment more powerful. Silence became heavier than speech. And with every sentence, a quiet question filled the room. How far is this going to go? Outside the building, people moved on with their day, unaware. Inside, history began to take shape in real time. Online, a few early viewers tuned into the live stream. In comments, confusion turned to curiosity. Then, curiosity turned to disbelief. Then, disbelief transformed into a kind of collective focus. People began sending links. Screens lit up across cities, offices, dorm rooms, kitchens. "You have to watch this," they typed. "Something's happening." Inside the hearing, the narrative shifted. The words were no longer just about policy or procedure. They were about moments people recognized in their own lives, moments of being ignored, silenced, underestimated. Without raising her voice, Crockett tapped into something raw and familiar. It wasn't performance. It felt like release. And the room could feel it. A member on the panel shifted uncomfortably. A witness swallowed hard. For a split second, the carefully controlled environments of Congress felt human, exposed, fragile. That was the moment people would replay later. That was when they leaned in. Then came the line no one was ready for. It didn't sound dramatic on paper. It wasn't loud. It wasn't filled with complex language. But it struck harder than a shouts ever could. The kind of sentence that hangs in the air, refusing to land, echoing in your chest long after it's been spoken. For half a second, the entire room went silent. That silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. It was filled with everything that couldn't be denied anymore. And somewhere in that stillness, the balance began to shift. Observers in the back of the room exchanged looks, not sarcastic, not amused, stunned. A reporter lowered their camera for a moment, forgetting her job, simply watching like everyone else. Even those who disagreed felt it. You didn't have to be on any side to recognize what was unfolding. It was bigger than sides. Then, slowly, responses began to ripple through the space, not in words, but in body language. A quiet nod, a long exhale, a glance between colleagues that said everything words would avoid. What had started as a hearing had quietly transformed into a reckoning. And that was only the beginning. Because the real impact wasn't just happening in the room, it was happening everywhere else. Social media began to catch fire. Clips were cut, posted, reposted. Millions of people paused their scrolling and stared at their screens. Tearful reactions, shocked expressions. Some felt validation, others felt discomfort. But almost no one felt indifferent. Captions appeared under the videos. Goosebumps, unbelievable. This is history. And most of all, watch until the end. They truly had no idea what was coming next. Back in the hearing, the tone deepened. The message grew more direct without becoming louder. It was steady, deliberate, unstoppable. Each sentence connected to the next like a chain being forged in real time. Pressure mounted, not on one person, but on the entire narrative that had existed before that day. The question was no longer who was right or wrong. The question became, how long had this been allowed to continue? That realization hit harder than any accusation. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. A moment that was never scripted, never prepared, never planned. It changed everything. A detail surfaced, something overlooked, ignored, minimized for far too long. It came out not as a dramatic reveal, but as a quiet truth slipping into the light. The kind of truth that instantly resmooth everything that came before it. People would later replay that moment again and again, each time realizing more of what they missed the first time. The room seemed smaller suddenly, the air heavier, the walls closer. No one moved. This was the point of no return. And just when you think you understand the full weight of what's happening, you realize this isn't the climax. Not yet. Because the next part, the part no one saw coming, is the moment that will define everything that follows. The sentence after the silence. The look across the table. The single exchange that turned a hearing into something people would remember for years. And it happens in just a few seconds.